Let me introduce Dr. Marquardt. When I was corresponding with Mike, I was always interested to see where he was, because he never seemed to be where he worked or lived in Washington or Northern Virginia. I got emails from Utah, the Netherlands, Malaysia, and other places that I've probably forgotten about. So Mike is a very accomplished guy. He's the author of about 20 books, and that just astounds me right there, that he must crank out a book like every year to 2 years for a period of time. And he probably started when he was a very early in his career, which I'm envious that he has that many books. He's trained more than 75,000 managers in over 100 countries. He serves as a consultant, besides being a professor at George Washington University. He also serves as a consultant to a number of Fortune 500 and Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, Marriott, Boeing, DuPont, Motorola, Nortel, and also to the governments of a lot of different countries around the world, including Indonesia, Ethiopia, Egypt, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. You get the idea. He knows what he's doing. He's a very experienced guy, and we're really happy to have him here. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mike Marquardt. Mike?
Thank you, Greg, and thank you all for coming. I have a very modest goal for tonight, that each of your lives will be changed in the next hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to introduce you to a tool, a methodology that can be not only powerful whenever you work with a group of people, but something that you can use 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So let me begin. I'm not sure if I'm real good with both hands here. I'm going to move this to my left and my right. Action learning is used for many purposes, and what I hope to do this evening, I'm going to first take about 15 minutes to give you an overview of what action learning is, what are the essential dimensions of action learning, and then we're going to do it. So we'll have every table will be, using action learning, applying it. Now, those of you who are at tables of 3 or 4 will have to join other tables of 3 or 4. Ideally, the group size should be about 6 to 8 people. So we'll get you working in action learning so you can experience what has been the passion of my life for the past 15 years. Now, many of us have heard the term action learning, and many organizations actually believe they use it. There was a recent survey in ASTD that said 63% of all organizations use action learning for leadership development. And for many people, action learning means that we're using real problems rather than case studies or lecture, or anything that is not a lecture is called action learning. But action learning really means that the person and group is learning while it's acting. So in action learning, while a group of people work on a task, identify the key problem, develop strategies, take action, they improve. They continuously learn. So every time they do an act or repeat an act, they do it better the next time they do it because they've learned. And it's at its most powerful, you do it while you're acting. Have any of you ever been approached or in a store where you have a great salesperson, and that salesperson is trying to convince you to buy a product? And while he or she is talking to you, they ask you a few questions, they see what excites you, and they modify their presentation because they're learning. They change their presentation for each individual, because if they said the same thing to everybody, no one would buy it. You have to, pitch it to each individual's interest or benefit. That's an example of action learning. Whenever you interact with someone, you're learning. Every time you interact with your child or your subordinate or a neighbor, you improve the action because you've learned how to do it more effectively the next time. Now, action learning is most powerful when you have a very complex, difficult problem and you need everyone in a group to learn because you're looking for a great breakthrough strategy. You have to find something that's innovative. And so action learning is it's most powerful when you are working as a team, working on a difficult, challenging problem. Now, action learning has many benefits that occur simultaneously. And what makes it so powerful? While you are working on a problem and developing strategies, every single leadership skill can be developed in dynamics of action learning. Action learning creates within 30 minutes great high-performing teams, whether they have worked together for 25 years and hate each other, or they've never met before. In 30 minutes, they're a high-performing team. And action learning can change the culture because it changes people and it changes the system. So action learning does all of these things simultaneously because you have to do them together. There's no, if you become a much better leader but you go back to your same organization, it's not going to work. Great leaders know how to lead teams. Teams have to solve problems. So all these things go together. Now, I first got introduced to action learning about 14 years ago. And at that time, there maybe were 14 organizations around the world that used action learning. Now there are thousands, tens of thousands. And every type of organization around the world, in every country, in Korea, every large organization uses action learning. In Japan, in Brazil. It's used in large companies of 300,000 people, small companies of 15 or 20 people. Public organizations, government organizations, academic corporations, every type of organization uses and benefits from action learning because it's built upon universal principles of what makes every human being learn and what provides respect and dignity and meaning to every individual. And it works with every group because it's built upon all dynamics of groups and can work in any type of organization. It's built on universal principles and many different theories and disciplines, which I'll talk about later. As I mentioned, I worked for 25 years with hundreds of organizations all over the world. I did a lot of leadership development, a lot of team dynamics, a lot of organizational change. And then I discovered action learning about 14 years ago. And I have found no better way to develop leaders than through action learning. No better way to help people to become systems thinkers. No better way to solve problems or build teams, bar any, through action learning. It's the most powerful tool and process I've experienced. And over the past 14 years, I've tried to make action learning as powerful as I could and as simple as I could. And I discovered that if I had 6 components in place and 2 ground rules, I could make it work every time. I could always help a group, no matter what the group was, whatever the problem, come up with a great strategy, a good insight, clarity, confirmation that they were on the right path. That every group got smarter. They worked better. They were able to understand and solve problems better because they were smarter. And that they enjoyed the process. So I'm going to challenge that to you in a few moments to see if that happens in your group. So, the first thing you need for action learning is the group has to have an urgent problem. It has to be urgent. That means that, there's a time frame. Some people are going to suffer if we don't get this problem taken care of. Can be the more complex it is, the more the group has to learn. The more important it is, the more urgency and expectations. But you've got to have an urgent problem. And we're going to do it in a few moments, so I'm not looking for billion-dollar programs, which I've worked on, but something that's important to someone at your table. So at every table, we're going to give you the opportunity of getting some great help. So your problem might be you have a teenager you don't know how to deal with, or a neighbor who you don't, who has his leaves on your side of the fence, or you got an employee, who you don't know how to motivate, or you got a crisis that occurred in your office or your home life or whatever. Typically, action learning is built around organizations and workplace situations, although I've done things on a global scale. I was just in Malaysia where we worked with 80 deans of universities throughout Malaysia where they're trying to change the entire education system of the country. So it can be used in some very nationwide, community-wide, and so forth. But most organizations use it within their organization to solve their billion-dollar problems and develop their top leaders and to build high-performing teams. So the first thing, you need a problem. Okay? Second, you have a group of people working on this task. And we know enough about group dynamics and sociology and mathematics and so forth to recognize the ideal size for a group between 4 and 8. Now, we've all been in groups of 10 and 12 and 15 people trying to make decisions together and so forth. And none of us have ever been successful. It doesn't work. There's lots of reasons why it doesn't work. If you got 12 people, give them 2 urgent problems. So 6 to 8 people, you want people with different perspectives because you're looking for great ideas. You want something that's outside the box if you can find it. Something that gets people to, be real excited by something new. And you want at least 4 people because you want synergy. You want creativity. You want energy. You need resources to do the work. Find the power, find the passion, find the knowledge that you need. The third component is that the group you're going to be working with in a few minutes will be working differently than any group you've ever been a part of. Different language, different norms, different purposes, different values. You're going to focus on questions rather than answers. You're going to be focusing on how I can help other people in the group rather than help myself. Has anyone here been to Japan? Few people. If you, those who've been, or if you've been to China or many parts of Asia, let's say you're going to a pub in Japan, and the waiter comes and pours everybody their glass of beer and puts the pitcher in the middle of the table. Now, in the United States, if you're at a restaurant and the pitcher is in the middle of the table and your glass is empty, how do you get it filled? You reach for the pitcher, you pour it for yourself. In Japan, how do you get your glass filled? Everyone is watching your glass. It never gets close to being empty because everyone is focused on being sure that your glass is filled. So in action learning, most of us, when we get to a problem, we start offering our ideas. We start advocating. We start making statements. In action learning, it's just the opposite. I ask you, what can you offer? What's your opinion? What experience have you had? Because we know psychologically and biologically that what we ask for, we hear. And when someone makes a statement we've not asked for, what do? We deflect, reflect, reject, but we don't hear. That's a biological, it's part of our evolutionary process. So when we ask, we hear. When we ask, we show respect. When we ask, we give people an opportunity of helping us, which is the deepest level of happiness, when someone can help someone who is asking for help. and it changes us physiologically because it changes our brain processes. So the focus in action learning is questions and reflection and coming up with a great question. Now you might say to yourself, we're here, we got 30 minutes, we've got to help this lady come up with some actions. And you're saying we got to come up with a great question. Doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. But it's the way all great learning and all great action occurs. Because has anyone in this room improved in action? Whether it's learning how to play golf or how to be a better parent, without first learning something? We cannot improve in action without first learning. Has anyone in this group been able to learn anything of any importance in any area without reflecting? We can't do it. Learning is based upon reflecting. Final question. Has anyone in this room been able to reflect without a question, either addressed to you or you addressed to yourself? Anyone? Anyone here been able to reflect without a question? Can't do it. Great questions lead to great reflection. Great reflection leads to great learning. Great learning leads to great actions. All the great inventions in the history of the world came because the inventor asked the question, a great question that no one had asked before. And he reflected on it. Sometimes Einstein reflected for 10 years on the relationship between energy and speed and mass. But he had the question, he reflected, learned, and developed the foundations of quantum physics. So the action learning, we focus on questions, getting people out, giving people opportunity to be respected. The fourth component of action learning is that the group has to take action or a member of the group takes action. In this case, the person who's presenting the problem to you will be assuring you that he or she's going to take some action because it's urgent. I'm not sure what action I'm going to take. I'm not making any commitments as to what action, but I'm going to take action because the group has to know that action is going to be taken. Otherwise, there's no accountability, there's no energy, there's no learning. So in action learning, every time a group meets, whether it meets only one time is going to occur in this group, or they meet 4 times over 4 weeks on a multi-million-dollar project, at the end of every session, you've got to take action between this and the next session. Because in action learning, you learn from your actions. There's never should be any action from which you don't learn. And anything you learn, it's really not valuable learning unless you can apply it. Action learning is always practical. If you can't apply the learning, it's not very seen as valuable. The fifth component of action learning is that everyone in the group knows that when they get into an action learning group, you are there to learn as well as to come up with actions and strategies. Everyone in the group needs to learn. Everyone has to develop their leadership abilities. Everyone has to learn how to work as a team with this particular team. Because we have to get smarter. The learning is just not something on the side and it's interesting, whatever. The learning is essential for our success. The more we learn, the faster and better we'll come up with a great strategy. Let's say we got a $100 problem. And we got 5 people in a group, and they each have $10 of talent and ability. You got a $50 group trying to solve a $100 problem. What happens? The group agonizes, days and weeks and comes up with a mediocre, non-systemic solution. But an action learning group that has gotten up to maybe $300 of capacity because they've learned individually and they've learned as a team and they multiplied their capacity. You got a $300 group looking at a $100 problem. What do you think happens? They solve it in 10 minutes and they go home. That's like Tiger Woods. Say you got to shoot under 100. He doesn't have to worry too much about that. He does it every day. You and I could golf for months and years and maybe not do it because he has the power to resolve that course. And so you get a smart group. They not only have the ability to solve a problem more quickly, but also we're trying to develop leaders for the long term. Organizations, these are high potential leaders. These are people that may serve in that organization for 10 or 20 years, make thousands of decisions over the next 20 years. And they may work in teams for the next 20 years. And they've got to change the culture and organization. So solving the problem may be worth $1 million to the organization. But if I can develop 6 great leaders and build a great team, that may be worth $100 million to the organization. So action learning recognizes that learning and action, they're together. You cannot act without learning, cannot learn without action. They both benefit each other. You don't separate them in action learning. And the 6th component of action learning, there has to be someone in the group who focuses on the learning, focuses on helping the team succeed. Ask questions that will improve the performance of the group. The other 5 or 6 of you will be working on the task. But this person's going to be working on how I can make each of you a better leader, how I can make this a high-performing team, and how we can identify the strategies and learnings and skills and transfer them to other parts of the organization, other parts of our life. And that person's the action learning coach. So if you have these 6 components in place, it's like a magic card trick. It always works because I've created all the conditions. If you're missing any of these things, you're going to lose some of the power. Now, I needed to jumpstart action learning because I had to make it as fast as I could. When you work for these billion-dollar corporations or you're in an emergency with the UN refugee program or whatever, you've got to move quickly and exponentially almost. So I created 2 kind of ground rules or norms so I could get every group performing, as you'll see in a few minutes, within 30 minutes. Within 10 minutes, they're working at a high level. So the first ground rule is that statements can be made only in response to questions. Anyone can ask a question. A question might generate 5 or 10 responses. Or if it's a great question, it will generate a lot of great reflection, which might generate learning and a great strategy. Because in action learning, we're not looking for quantity. We're looking for greatness. One great strategy is all you need to change the world. So statements can be made only in response to question. Anyone can ask a question. Anyone can answer a question. But to play the game, you are either answering or asking a question. The second ground rule or norm, or just explaining the role, I had to give the coach power. Because the coach is focusing on that which is important, namely learning. The group is focusing on that which is urgent, which is the action. And we know that when the urgent and the learning come side by side, the learning gets disregarded. So I had to give power to the action learning coach. Action learning coach manages the time, and when the learning coach intervenes, it's like E.F. Hutton. Everybody stops working on the task for a few moments and listens to the questions of the action learning coach. And the coach only asks questions that will improve the performance of the group, get clarity in the problem, identify ways in which this group can work better and faster than they presently are, and help them identify their leadership skills that they can improve. So the learning coach manages the time, intervenes when they see an opportunity to improve the performance of the group. Okay, with that, we're going to go into action. So we need at each table someone who has a problem. Doesn't be a big problem, but something that's bothering you. So at your tables, identify someone who's willing to share a problem. But it's got to be an urgent problem, not something, well, if I get around to it. It's got to be urgent. Something that's, preventing you from sleeping at night, or, you've been working at for years and you'd like to get some resolution to it, or it just occurred this morning, your boss gave you a big project. Okay, so, and those of you who are at tables of 3 or 4, if you could join another table of 3 or 4, let's try not to have any, ideally no more than 8 in a group, and at least five people in a group. So get organized, and in a moment I'll be asking who's going to be the problem presenter in each group and who will be willing to be the action learning coach, and then I'll guide you. So 2 minutes to get yourself organized, get a problem presenter in a group. If one group has more than one problem presenter, there'll be another group that'll be happy to take that person. We gotta get the two of you. You got a problem presenter and a coach? Okay, come up with one. Come up. We all have problems. Doesn't matter whether we want to share it or not. Everybody has at least 5 problems at any one time. Okay, quickly, every group, if there's a group that doesn't have a problem, then we have some people who are not brave enough, because all of us have at least 3 or 4 problems at any one time. It's a matter of whether we're willing to share it. But I assure you, if you share it, you can get some great help. So take advantage of these other people that are willing to help you. Pardon?
We really do have an urgent problem. We can't get in touch with his.
You have a problem?
No. Dr. Cook has his problem.
Okay, good.
No,
Okay. Okay, is there any group that is missing a problem? Does every group, if you don't have a problem in your group, raise your hand and we'll send some people after. Okay, every group has a problem presenter. Okay, then every group we need someone who's going to be the coach. So identify in your group quickly who will be the coach, and I will guide the coach from the front of the room. Okay? Every group has a coach. Raise your hand if you... So is there any table missing a coach yet? We have to have a coach. Okay, okay. Coaches, this is your guideline. I'll go through it with you together and everybody... So, in about 1 minute, the coach is going to ask the problem presenter, would you take a minute or two to tell us the problem or task you'd like us to help you with? And the person takes a minute or two, no more. The more the person presents, the more it throws people off track. They give information, they try to force people into their solution, whatever it may be. Just take a minute saying, here's my problem. Trust the group that they will ask the right questions. They will get to the essence, the root problem. They will get strategies. So just take a minute or two. Then the coach will say, thank you very much. Who has the first question? Okay? Then after, and I'll come up from about 8 or 10 minutes, I will stop everybody, and the coach will ask 4 more questions. The coach will first ask everyone, how are we doing? We've worked for about 10 minutes. How are we doing so far as a group? Okay or not okay? Now, their question is very specific. All they're asking is how you feel. You don't have to give us the story behind your feeling or justify your feeling. Just tell us how you feel. Because the more you say, the more you influence others. There's no right or wrong answer. If you feel we're doing okay, say okay. You're not doing okay, you're not doing okay. Doing great, say great. Just tell us how you feel. Because I want to get everybody into the action. That's a judgment. Get your feelings involved. Then the coach is going to ask, what are we doing well? Even if everybody says we're doing terrible, what are we doing well? Everybody says we're doing great, still ask what we're doing well. Anything else? You don't ask each person. The only question you ask each person, how do you feel we're doing? Other questions directed to the group as a whole. What are we doing well? Anything else we're doing well? What can we do better? Anything else we could do better? Do we have agreement as to what is the real problem here? The person presented 10 minutes ago. Do we have agreement? We all heard something. We talked about it for 10 minutes. Do we have agreement? It's a simple yes or no. Yes, we do. No, we don't. Whether they all say yes, they write it down. They all say no, you write it down, because we never know. I've had people say, yes, we have agreement. They write down 10 different things. No, we don't have agreement. They all write down the same thing. So you find out, get people to make judgments. First, feelings, judgment. I use all the actions and elements of learning, all parts of the body. So the coach will say, do we have agreement on the problem, yes or no? Let's write it down to see if we do. And people will write down, based upon 10 minutes, here's what I think the real problem is. Because we all know the essence of solving a problem is getting clarity on it. Once the problem is clear, the strategies emerge naturally. But most groups, they work on strategies and they don't have agreement on the problem. And so your strategy won't work if I think the problem is different than yours. So then the coach says, write it down. Everybody writes it down. Coach says, okay, now you've heard each other. Do we have agreement? Yes or no? No, yes, we do, whatever it may be. Then the coach says, okay, we'll work another 10 or 15 minutes. And then I'm going to ask the problem presenter what action he's going to take as a result of this group. And then I'll give everybody a 5-minute warning. And then the coach will ask the presenter, what action are you going to take? Were you helped? How were you helped? And then we'll go to everybody in the group, including the problem presenter. What did we do well as a group? What made us successful? We did come up with some ideas. What leadership skills did any of us demonstrate over the past 30 minutes? And what have we learned and done here that we could apply to our day-to-day work, our consulting, our organization? Okay, so coaches have a clear direction. I'll follow this. I will occasionally give reminders saying it's time to do your first intervention, so move along. Was there a question back here? Yeah. In this case, because of the time limit, I want the coaches just to get comfortable with these questions. Practice the questions so they come from you naturally. Do not get involved in the action because your questions will not penetrate to the subconscious as much. A great question from a coach who is not involved in the action is very powerful. So learn your questions while you're there, but you're also observing that people are either asking or answering questions. So if someone's making a statement that has nothing to do with a question, you say, what question are you answering? Or if someone makes a statement saying, could you put that in the form of a question? The questions are so powerful that you want to be sure that people are either asking or answering questions. Now you might say, well, this is very uncomfortable for me to ask questions. But what do you do with your best friend all the time? When you're with your best friend, all you do is ask each other questions. We love being around people whom we can either ask questions. None of us has a close friend who doesn't ask us questions or allow us them to ask questions. It's the most natural thing. We ask questions everywhere except where it's most important, when we're in an organization trying to solve a problem. And kids ask questions naturally. Everywhere in the world, people ask questions. And everywhere in the world where people ask each other questions, you start building good relationships, you learn, and you get creativity. So the coach has to be, besides learning your questions, make sure people are either answering or asking a question. And try to answer just the question that's asked of you. Because the more concisely a team or individual answers a question, the more quickly the group can move on to the next question. When someone starts answering something that's been asked because they want to show their intelligence or they don't listen, and 90% of us don't really listen, and that's why we don't get a lot done. If you listen carefully to the question, sometimes it's a 1 or 2 word answer. Okay? So, coaches, we are now at 12 minutes after 7 o'clock, so about 7:20, 7:22, you're going to have your first intervention. And about 7:35, 7:35, you're going to ask the person what action. We're going to give this person about 25 minutes. Now, most of the time we need 25 hours, but we're going to show you that in 25 minutes, there are going to be 20 people in this room who are going to get some ideas they never considered before, or get more assurance that what they are thinking about really is the way to go. Okay, so coaches, ask your first question. To indicate how you were helped. We don't have time, we don't need to know what actions you're going to take. But let's hear from a few of the problem presenters who believe they were, given some good help, some ideas, and just tell us how you were helped. What did the group do that helped you? Okay, so we'll pass this around to a few people. This gentleman back here, you were the one that were the problem presenter? Okay, so you feel you were helped? It's just tell us how you were helped.
Hi everybody, my name is Vlad. The problem that I presented today was that I'm an international student and I'm having troubles with finding a job on campus or off campus in a way that it has to be an internship. And by discussing the problem and hearing so many questions and trying to answer them and then giving questions back, I realized that there are 3 things that I have to do to solve the problem. Is that, first of all, I have to talk to my professors, and they will definitely be the ones who will find a internship or a job for me in the field that I'm studying in. And second thing is that I have to go and talk to international office to know what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do, because I'm international students and there are a lot of rules and bureaucracy processes. And the final thing is that I have to make a list of questions that I have to ask both professors and international office and get ready for a future interview.
Okay, great. Let's give this group a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, we have a couple other folks that would like to indicate how they were helped. We have over here. Okay.
My name's Debbie Farmer, and my problem is a little difficult to identify because I'm not sure I even know what the problem is. But the scenario is my son is graduating from college in May, and my concern is helping him find a job, not live at home forever. And historically, he's been not as independent as I'd like him to be, and he's 22 years old. And but what really helped, I think, this group and asking the questions, they weren't always agreeing. They were actually asking me difficult questions, and some of the questions were, you know, am I enabling the dependent behavior when I really prefer the independent behavior, and a lot of things like that. So I think it was helping me. And then several of them did share some ideas or ask me, like, have you thought about, and gave me some suggestions and comments.
Okay, so you got some good ideas. Okay, great. Thank you. Let's give this round of applause, this table. Okay, maybe 1 or 2 others that feel they got some good help and like to thank their group for their great help. Okay. See, the group, you know, one thing when you help someone ask questions, you become a part of that person. You're proud of what you've done. Okay?
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and our scenario was a training process that we're looking to implement that in some people's eyes is not necessarily what the training needs. So we came up with some good solutions, such as additional job aids, perhaps, that can be downloadable, or just some help with hint sheets or supplemental aids that can be developed aside from what's being implemented, just so that the student can be a little more comfortable with something other than what is out there, that in the eyes of so many people, it's not necessarily what's best for them.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, we'll have one final, two. This guy's anxious. So two quick testimonials about how your group helped you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Lisgo, and the problem I presented to my group was not a very straightforward one. I have a 12-year-old, and yeah, so there's lots of issues. It's a very emotional issue, obviously, for a lot of different people, depending on your experience. And the group asked me a lot of very difficult questions and some very good soul searching going on over here. It's a table full of women, of course. And so we've come up with a very, very, what I call groundbreaking strategy. Anybody wants to buy the 12-year-old? See me. No, they basically confirmed what I've already kind of decided I'm going to do to handle the way things are going. So it was nice to have that confirmation behind the strategies that need to be implemented. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Give the group a round of applause. as I indicated, for some people, you have an idea, but you're not really confident. And through the question of the group, in this case, it seems like, okay, now I'm quite sure I'm doing the right path, because when you take action, if you take it with lack of confidence, it won't work. The best action in the world, you do it without. So when you take action, you have to have some confidence as well as competence. And so it seems like this group is giving you some confidence that you're on the right path, and you won't swerve from it. You have some goals, and you'll do it. Okay, over here was it the gentleman here? I think. Did you want to? Yes, please. Okay.
Good evening. My name is James Minter. I propose the question to my group: how do I align training and education with organizational goals? And after a series of punishing questions, they proved to me that my real problem is I want to know the value of training and education in my organization, and that what will lead to the how I go about aligning training and education. And I have a ton of questions here, and I want to take them all to work with me tomorrow. But
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now, the one aspect of questions, they keep on asking. That's the power of questions. So all of you who were getting questions asked and ideas, some of those questions are still reverberating in your subconscious or consciousness. And so a question that may not have generated or triggered an idea immediately, maybe in the middle of the night or tomorrow morning, you say, gee, I remember that gets me to think about such and such, which leads it. So the power of questions is they keep on giving, as one of my students once said. Okay, we have one final person here really eager to say how she was out. Uh-huh.
Even though I'm unemployed, I feel really rich from the information that I was just shared by my group. I give them kudos. I'm unemployed, and I was asked questions on what route I'm taking. And I was asked a lot of thought-provoking questions, and I also was given some information on how to take up training, because I'm a trainer, and a lot of the trends today is online training, and I need to upgrade my skills. So I was given some websites that I can subscribe to and upgrade my skills for little or nothing. And also, someone at the table took my resume and then emailed me a link. I collected a few business cards. So I really feel rich, even though I'm unemployed right now.
Okay, you can see the groups were formed, to my knowledge, none of you had ever worked as a group before. A few of you know a few other people, but you never were these same 6 or 8 or 9 people. And yet, within 30 minutes, all of you were really working hard. Very challenging things you had in front of you. And as you can hear from many of the folks who are very grateful that 5 or 6 strangers in 20 or 30 minutes were able to give me some ideas. As the one lady back there said, she's been working on this problem for a year. And she got 5 ideas that she had never considered over the past year from a group of 6 strangers. And that occurred in probably many other tables where, people started seeing things or getting confirmation or trying new things that happened. So the groups, were able to come up with some ideas, some actions. You got more effective as a team. I suspect that the questions started getting better. The questions started being asked of each other rather than just the problem presenter. And that it was an enjoyable process, because we like to be in a group in which there is some need, in which we can be of some benefit, in which our ideas are being requested, in which we're able to give other people an opportunity of helping me or helping someone else in the group. So you get a lot of, good vibrations, growth as a team, and good results. So let's give ourselves a round of applause for your great work. Okay, let me talk a little bit about maybe a few of the dynamics behind action learning and why it works. Because it doesn't work by chance. It works because we've got some things going on. The first thing is that the groups you are working with, as I promised you, is different than any group you've been a part of before. Most groups, it's primarily statements, advocating, trying to get them to buy your idea, where now we're working at what's best for the group. And so I like to compare an action learning group to other types of problem-solving groups or groups like a caterpillar to a butterfly. All groups have members in the group and they have a purpose. But they don't get much done because they don't know how to work together. But if you took your hands and took a butterfly and a caterpillar, they're made of the same organic elements. But what I've done is metamorphized the group, make it into a butterfly. A butterfly can do many things, can see many things, do many things, has much more power than a caterpillar would. And so some of the differences you can see is that action learning, we're here to learn. We're trying to learn while we act. We act our way into learning, in a sense. We act our way into good leadership skills, good group skills, and so forth. So we get much more competent as a group. But learning's important. It's not just an interesting sidelight. It helps us for the short-term benefit of working better as a team, coming up with great strategies, but developing us for the long term. Second, the group is going to be taking action, or someone in the group is going to take action. So there's different kinds of expectations and energy. Third, you have membership is not reserved to just experts or just people in your department. You can see how strangers with different perspectives can give you insights that you might have been working in your office for weeks or months and not got that idea. Because what is inside the box thinking for an engineer is outside the box thinking for a marketing person. And so engineers ask different kinds of questions. And I don't have to know the problem or know the situation to be able to ask a good question about it. Because I think differently, have different perspectives. And the more complex a problem is, the more valuable is diversity, and the less valuable is expertise. The fourth difference, you see, we focus on questions. And the better our questions are, and some groups were struggling, and the questions weren't, kind of leading questions or, guides of questions. But as we got into better questions, we got into much better learning, much better reflection, much better action. You have a learning coach with the power to say, okay, stop. We're going to look at how we can improve our performance. And you always get systems. All of your strategies start looking at the entire system. Instead of maybe just yourself or just the other person or this, you start looking at the entire system. And what part of the system can you change and have impact? So, quickly, the problem, the more urgent it is, the more energy is involved. But you want, the more complex it is, the more important it is, the more you have to develop yourself. You got to get smarter. You got to work better as a team. You have to develop your leadership skills more. You have to incorporate your diversity more. So within the group, you need some knowledge, obviously some expertise, some familiarity, but you want a variety of different possibilities. And these are some of the problems that I've worked with different organizations over the last year or so. And I say a problem might be a $1 billion project that we have 3 months to work on, or it might be a crisis in which we got 30 minutes to work on. And we've got to make a decision in 30 minutes. And we asked each other questions. And it's amazing, saying, well, how can we you get much better decisions much quicker through questions and statements. And I say in action learning, what we had here this evening was we worked one problem, the group formed for that purpose, and it disbands. But action learning a group could continue to work together, and every month 4 people get together and help each other. They're from 4 different organizations or 4 different departments. And you get a lot of great ideas that you might not get from your own staff or from your own family, but you get it from 3 or 4 strangers. Yes?
One of the problems that we ran into at our table was that we didn't always have the questions to elicit the wonderful ideas that we wanted to say. So sometimes I know I was guilty of sometimes saying, well, let me just tell you X. So if you're at of meeting, an action learning opportunity,
Yeah.
in depth, a real one.
Right.
You have an expert there in some aspect, and a topic has come up, but the people don't know how to ask the right question. What do you do to enable that person to share their knowledge?
Okay, great question. Let's say you have some experience in this area, or you have some expertise, and no one asks you, well, what do you think? What's the question you can ask the group? Would you be interested in my experience? Would you be interested? I know I worked in that project 2 years ago. Would you be interested in my knowledge of that? You just ask. That's an appropriate question, but I can assure you, number one, they'll say yes, and they will listen. But if you say, here's what I did, they will say, well, who gave you the right to jump in? So it may seem like, well, it's just a trick, but no. You're asking the approval of the group. Would you like to hear my experience? I've worked in that project a couple years ago. The group will say yes, and because they've said yes, they will hear you. But if you just say, geez, they haven't asked me, I'll tell them. This is what you should do, or here's what I did, people will reject that, reflect it, deflect it. So it's easy. You just have to get in the nature. When you're with your best friend and she has a problem, you don't say, here's what you should do. I know if I do it to my wife, she'll kill me. I have to say, would you be interested in some of my ideas? And then she might give it. But I know that if I just give her advice, men like to give people the answer, women the answer. And women don't want the answer right away. They want to be heard. They want to be sure you understand them. And that's very important because people here, we're looking not just for facts, we're looking for changing people's mindset, getting people excited and motivated. And that's not by knowledge alone. So, okay, second, as we talked about the group, ideally 4 to 8 members. Those of you who had 9 in a group, it gets a little hard for everybody to participate because you want everybody to participate, everybody to get smarter, everybody to work well as a team, and to reach some general consensus and support, understanding. So it's difficult when you go past 8, less than 4. Now you want diversity. I have a little story here. I talked about the pizza man. I had one of my colleagues, his name was Rick, he had they were bidding on an RFP for the federal government, a financial project. And he had his financial team. And they're working on this big multi-million-dollar project, and it's Wednesday afternoon, project's due on Friday. And they're getting tired and they're getting hungry. So Rick says, we've only got 48 hours. Why don't we order some pizza, and can we work a little bit later tonight? Can we work to 7 or 8 o'clock? So we want to get a good proposal. And the group said, okay. So the pizza man comes, and Rick says, geez, Mike said we should have different perspective. All you got is these financial people. So he said to the pizza man, can you join us? And all you have to do is ask questions if you see us doing something or what you don't understand. Just ask a question about it. And I'll call your boss, give you a big tip, get you released. Sounded good to the pizza man, but you imagine how it sounded to Rick's colleagues. 48 hours and he brings a pizza man in, but Rick's the boss. So they start working. And one of the people goes up to the chart and said, okay, draws arrows from here and there. So the pizza man, after a few minutes, said, why is that arrow going from A to F? And the person says, reason 1. And someone else in the group says, oh, I would see it for reason 2. And the third person said, well, if we use reason 2, can't we go from B to F? And the first person said, yeah, I guess we could. What was happening? It goes on in every organization, every day in the world almost. When you're with a group of fellow experts, and everyone seems very enthusiastic about this idea. It's something you've never done before, like building the unsinkable Titanic or the Challenger, whatever. So you're not sure, but everyone around you seems pretty enthusiastic about the idea, the arrow, but you're not sure. How many of you will take the risk of saying, why is that arrow going from A to F? The reality is none of us will. It's been shown so many times, so many research, because we're afraid of asking a dumb question, of being ridiculed, who let this person in our group, and so forth. So it's safer not to take the risk. And because we don't take the risk, 1,400 people lost their lives in the Titanic, and it goes on in organizations throughout. But the pizza man did not have to worry. He was asking questions naturally. But he knows a lot about finance too, doesn't he? He has to manage maybe a very tight budget. He has to collect money every day from the people. So he had different perspectives. But what occurred here, you have different perspectives, but also the freedom to ask a question. And most of the time, organizations or groups don't come up with a great strategy because someone or everyone in the group is afraid to ask the real tough question, or a question that might show that I'm not the brilliant person I'm impressed the other members of the group with being. So now within your group, usually an action learning group meets for 3, 4, 6 times over 3, 4, 6 months. So rarely does the group have all the knowledge it needs to solve this problem, all the power it needs, or all the passion it needs. So they have to go out, they interview people or get power between sessions, or they invite an expert to come in to answer their questions for an hour, and then they thank him very much and let him out of the room so he doesn't immobilize the group. So, but once the group is formed, you want to keep it intact. It's better that all 6 people meet 4 times than 5 of the 6 meet 24 times. Because you get all 6 people there 4 times, they will more than solve this problem. But whenever you miss a person, it's just a waste of time. You undo it, redo it, and so forth. So, what makes action learning work is that everyone in the group behaves this way. Reflect on your own group. That just occurred in the last 30 minutes. Was everybody in the group committed to helping this person? Was everybody beginning to listen carefully to each other's questions or responses? Were we willing to help each other work better as a team, give feedback on leadership skills that we had, or what made us successful as a team? Were we respectful? Did we provide support and comfort to each other? Were we concerned about what was best for the project or best for this problem presenter rather than getting just my idea accepted? We all experience that. But it never occurs in any other kind of group. Rarely have we ever experienced a group in which you have this kind of behavior. But it occurs in every action learning group. Why? Why do we get the behavior that we do? I created a culture. I created norms and a language and a culture. And what occurs around this table is different than what will happen outside that door, because the culture outside that door is different. Because culture determines behavior. I can demonstrate it. If I took everybody in this room and took you all into a church, 200 people with very different personalities, and in the church we'd behave somewhat alike. Respectful, silent, and so forth. And I take the same 200 people, and we're all great Redskins fans. And I take you to FedEx Field, and the Redskins score a touchdown. All of you who are very quiet and silent in the church are shouting up and down and jumping like crazy fans. Because that's the culture. That's the situation. That's the norm. That's the expectation. So around this table, this is the expectation. The norm, the greatest norm in the world, the most positive, powerful norm that make terrible people become nice people, that make poor functioning groups become high performing groups, is statements can be made only in response to questions. That's the most powerful. You do that with your friends. And so when you have statement response to questions, you get cohesiveness, you get caring, you get respect, you get listening, you get creativity, you get results. You get an opportunity to helping others. All of us, deep down, what makes us happy is the ability to be of some help to someone in need. And all of us, the only way you can demonstrate respect for me is to ask me a question. You can't tell me I respect you. And you can say that. But if I ask you a question that shows I'm interested in you and your ideas and your perspective, in that single moment, I demonstrate respect for you. And when I demonstrate respect for you, you start liking me. And you show me two people hate each other, and you give them where they ask each other questions, I'll show you a changed relationship. Had one group where two people worked for 20 years. They hated each other. After an hour of action learning, the one person said, this is the first time in 20 years in which I've listened to you. I felt you had something to contribute. 20 years. And I've had some people say, and one person working in the Navy said, I've been in the Navy for 25 years. And this is the first group in 25 years, and the thousands of meetings I had, in which I got some satisfaction. I enjoyed it. We got better, got respected, we got results. That's the power of the norms, the questions, that we're all here to learn, we're all here to be of help to the organization or to an individual. Third is the questions. The questions are so powerful. That's why I make it a ground rule. Questions help us understand the problem. The only way a group of people can get agreement on a problem, even if they're experienced in their own department for 5 years, because I can go to any organization and say, what's the problem, write it down. They all will write something different. It's lack of morale, lack of money, lack of good supervision, whatever it be. The only way in which we get agreement on the problem is to ask each other, what are you touching? What are you feeling? And then we start realizing we have an elephant here rather than a tree or a wall or a leaf or a spear. Most groups, when they start working, they make two assumptions. One, I understand the problem, and everyone else understands it the same way I do. Those are two assumptions which are almost always incorrect, because each of us have a different life history. How we experience the problem or how we hear the problem is based upon our whole life. But that's rich, that's good, because we have to get the helicopter perspective, we have to get the system, understand that we have an elephant. Because if we don't get agreement on the problem, our strategies won't work for each other. You think the problem's a tree, the solution is an axe. And you think it's a wall, the solution is a dynamite. And you think it's an elephant, the solution is just gently pull the trunk. And most groups are trying to convince each other to dynamite or to chop, because they each understand the problem differently. The only way you get agreement on a problem is to ask each other questions about it. But questions do a number of things. They help you to think and reflect and be creative. They help you become good teams. They help you learn. They help develop respect. They do 101 things. To me, whenever you make a statement, you've lost an opportunity. A question is always more powerful, can do many things, much beyond the intent of the questioner even. And so when I do a lot of leadership training, leading with questions is, as I say, one of my more recent books, where leaders recognize great leaders ask great questions, and great questions make great leaders. There's a direct correlation. Great people ask great questions, and great questions make great people. You are what you ask. If you don't ask anything of anybody, no one wants to be around you, because you've stopped learning, you've stopped caring a long time ago. Questions show that you're learning, you're caring. Then strategies, you want holistic problem solving. You want to you never isolate the problem, you have to look at the context as well as the content. You have to look at the big picture, you look at the system. Most of us, we look at a problem, we just look at this situation. We don't look at the whole context, what caused it, what are the implications, what are some strategies, what particular leverage might change things. What do I have to change about myself? Because problems can never be solved unless you change yourself as well as the situation. And so there's a number of aspects when you look at problem solving, you want to do it a holistic perspective. You also want to be sure that you have a great strategy. a great goal that's inspiring. For example, I might have a student who is a poor student, misbehaves. And so my goal would be to get this student to behave better. So I have a lot of strategies to get the student to behave. I will, spend more time with him and more time with his parents, and I will change some rules that all the students must be in their desk by a certain point, and no one can do anything without raising their hand, all these kind of things. And after maybe a couple weeks or a month, I got this student behaving better. But what have I done to the other students? I created 20 other monsters maybe. Because my goal was limited. But what if my goal was I want to make this the best learning environment for all 20 of my students? It's more inspirational, I got more resources, more opportunities, more excitement. So you want to get great goals, really stretch people. So here's your problem. What would success look like? What would be the ideal? How could we solve this problem and any other problem? What kind of structure would allow that, or strategy? But in action learning, you always recognize you never get action unless you have the power, the passion, and knowledge you need. So action learning, once the group gets clarity as the problem and the goal, they say, okay, what kind of power do we need to get things happen here? What kind of passion is necessary? And what kind of knowledge do we need? And then you always take action, because action you learn from. Action, there's accountability. So after the end of each session, you say, okay, who's going to do what? And when? Next session, everybody reports their action, because you should learn a lot from every action you take. You got to test things out. You got to, get more power. You may have to get more knowledge, but you always have to have action. And then the fifth thing I said, everybody in the group has to learn. And when you're told that everybody has to learn, and generally when we have more time, everybody puts up their leadership skill they're working on, the one that they want to improve. Or their teaching skill if I'm working with teachers. Or their social work skill if I'm working with social workers. Because every skill can be used when you work with a group of people on with a problem with an unknown solution, and no one has power while you're working on it. Everybody's an equal trying to figure it out. Every teaching skill, every social work skill, every leadership skill, every parenting skill can be developed. So everybody is there, but when you put it up on the board, what does it mean? We're all vulnerable. None of us is perfect, but we don't want to admit it. And none of us wants to be the only one learning or recognizing we have an area to improve. But if everybody's doing it, we'll do it. And to develop a skill requires 4 things. Only occurs in action learning, whether it's parenting, teaching, leadership. Only place it occurs, you get all 4 of these things immediately, very quickly. The first thing, to develop a skill, has to be important to you, whether it's golfing or parenting or whatever. You never learn a skill if you don't care about it. Second thing, you have to have an opportunity to practice it. In the day-to-day world, even as a leader, we don't get a chance to practice a lot of skills we like to develop. But in action learning, every single leadership skill can be practiced. 3, you have to get feedback. You got to get feedback from other people. Here's how you did demonstrate that particular skill. And 4th, to develop a skill, you have to be able to reflect on your own before anyone else gives you feedback. How did you do? How successful were you? What could you have done better? And so that all those things occur, and that's why action learning in a very short period of time, in a day, will develop a leadership skill that someone's been working on for years, or a parenting skill, or a teaching skill, or whatever the case may be. So everybody's there to learn. Not only for the short-term benefit of really becoming a $1,000 group working on a $200 problem, but develop our leadership skills. We can use that the rest of our life. Great strategies, if the group develops a great strategy on this particular project, that strategy can be applied and adapted in many other situations. We all have had great learning experiences or great strategies that we've used in many different situations. The greater the strategy, the greater the learning, the more multiple applications we can make of it. So action learning is always trying to link and leverage all the learning skills and competencies. And I say in learning, the L is your learning is based upon your current knowledge, present knowledge, and through questions, reflection, you keep getting smarter and faster and better. And you learn new knowledge, you learn how to learn, you learn some values, mindset, skills, competencies. Every type of learning occurs quickly. And then 6, the action learning coach. You had a person who was there to help the group learn, focusing on being sure that they were asking and answering questions, because the better the questions, the better the actions. The better the questions, the better the group. So the person's kind of watching questions, but also looking at examples of leadership skills, if that's their role. Asking great questions, because the better questions the coach asks, the quicker and better that group improves its performance and skills. And so they'll ask questions, as you saw, the action learning coach will ask questions about the problem, ask questions about the strategy, ask questions about the individual levels of learning, leadership, the group levels of learning, and organizational levels of learning. And so in a typical action learning group, the group may be formed, and then they get their problem, and then they go through stages. What is the real problem? What's the great goal here? What are some actions, strategies? Take the action, grab the learning. Now, all of you are familiar with the 4 stages of groups. Groups form, and then storm, and then norm, and perform. So what's the first stage of action learning? 4 stages. What's the first stage? Norms. The norms are present before you arrive. You know, the norms are present. You're told these are the norms. Statements, response to questions. We're here to learn as well as to act. So we get the norms. And then we start. And then what's our next stage? We perform right away. There's no storming. There's no storming in action learning. There's storming of ideas, but there's not storming of personalities, because we set a very high norm. Statement response to questions. People change. And then what's the next stage? We start with a high norm. Most groups start with, they form, they storm, and then they set a norm, because your norms determines performance. The lower the norms, the lower the performance. The higher the norms, the higher performance. True in every aspect of life. So, action learning, high norm, we perform. What's the next stage? We raise the norms. What can we do better? And we perform at a higher level. We raise the norms. And action learning groups keep on improving performance because they keep on improving the norms. Most groups, after the storming, some norms are set, and those norms stay with that group for years and years and years later. Never interrupt this guy. Don't wink when this person, no. Just ignore that person. Show up late when you want. Turn your BlackBerry on whenever you wish. But in action learning, the norms keep growing. And so if there's any conflict, any disruptions, dysfunction, a group, and they learn how to do it better and better. And I say action learning works because it's built upon so many different theories. It uses all 5 schools of learning. You know, fly-by-night training leadership program. Because they realize the most effective and powerful way is to have real people work with real problems in real time with real consequences and real learning from that experience. So every type, and it's always very positive. The only person who might be a little bit negative might be the person himself. So how do you think you did in listening? Well, I don't know. You were listening very well, and I give you many examples. Because we do much better than we think we do because our subconscious is causing us to behave that way. You can see how action learning, because we ask great questions from a variety of perspectives, we start seeing the big picture, and we start getting actions, particularly if we go where the power, passion, and knowledge is. You start seeing systems. You start recognizing that you got to change the system. Myself, other people, the content, the context, so that when you come up with a strategy, it's a long-term, sustainable strategy that doesn't cause more problems than already exist. You build great teams. All teams, a great team is one that has great success in terms of gets action. None of us want to be a nice team, everybody likes each other, but we don't get anything done. Action learning, you're always performing at a high level. There's actions and high expectations. And you enjoy being it because people are being respectful. You're getting an opportunity to provide some value. And you're getting better and smarter as a team. So all those things occur in action learning very quickly. You act your way into being a great group. I can't tell you to be a great group. I can't tell you to be a great leader. I can't tell you to be a great parent. In action learning, we believe you act your way into greatness. And you do something and you learn from it. And you do it again, you learn a little bit more. And then you want to change the organization. An action learning group is a perfect learning organization. The way you create a learning organization is you change the culture. If I change the culture, I change behavior. I change possibilities. And so I wrote a lot of books, did a lot of research on learning organizations. I could never create a learning organization. It's too complex, it takes too long, and people are not that patient. They've got to see results between the learning and the action. And they see it within 10 minutes or within an hour, that this learning has enabled us to get to this action. And so I can create different kinds of cultures. Okay, we have 5 minutes for any questions. We promised to end at 8:30, so I'll be happy to answer a few questions now, and then I will thank you all for being here and stay around to answer individual questions, and I'll be happy to sign the books out there later on. Okay, a question there?
You mentioned you've done this in several different countries, and I was wondering if you had to change these anything or adapt it for different cultures. Do you have to do that?
There are some, this is natural. Everybody in the world asks questions. But some cultures, the discouragement of questions or the hierarchy is stronger. So when I'm in Korea, I say all organizations in Korea, I might have to ask the Korea manager, the senior person in the group, to make a little comment to the group. And so the senior manager says to the group, we've got a problem here. We all have to figure it out. I don't have the answer. This is a great urgent problem. And I'm going to have to ask you questions, and I'd like you to ask each other and me questions. And when the learning coach intervenes, I'll stop, and I'd like you to stop as well. Right away, the Koreans ask more questions. You say, well, Koreans never ask questions. They're so hierarchical. They do it. So some cultures are more easily able to ask questions. Others are not. We're very good at asking leading questions. But all of us ask great questions as a child. Every 2-year-old in the world asks great questions. All of us ask questions with our friends. So that's the essence of action learning. The other essence is that all of us have to continually learn. And most cultures, most people recognize that we can improve. None of us are at perfection. Thank you for the question. Yes? Pardon? If you... Pardon? If I repeat the question, you talk loud because my hearing isn't like it used to be.
When we were in our group, two things sort of struck me. One, you said that the group to be successful, the team members want to learn. And secondly, it seems that if the coach does not have the skill sets or the ability to keep us on track, we can really suffer as a group.
Yeah. Okay. Two questions. Let me answer the second one first. A coach is very, very valuable. I can take any group, and I work with CEOs and VPs, and they're working on $1 million or $1 billion projects. I can take any group and move them in an hour where they haven't moved in 2 weeks. Because I'm very good at coaching. I've done it, and so forth. Someone else is a coach, they're going to miss certain things, they won't have the question. It's like the great hockey player, I know where the puck's going to be, and I go there rather than follow along. I see the big picture. Just like those of you who are great at what you do, you sense the whole thing. And so what makes a coach powerful is the ability to sense the whole thing and come up with great questions that will transform the group and go deep into the subconscious and so forth. Now, your first question about the success of the group depends upon
the group wanting to learn and the skill set of the coach.
Yeah. Well, the group will be successful if the behavior I've given up there for all group members is present. And usually that occurs because why is everybody eager to solve this problem? Because maybe you're the one that's going to go in the coal mine to implement the problem. Or maybe this person you're working with, you might need his help next month. Or you like this guy. Or you want to learn how to work better as a team, or you want to develop a leadership skill. There's lots of reasons why it's to your best interest to be a benefit to this group. And when everybody else is learning, then you say, okay, I'll jump in. Now, we know some people are a little more recalcitrant and difficult, but it's hard to overcome. Behind that door, they'll quickly revert back. But most people will say, this is something that will make me more successful outside the door. Why don't I do this all the time? Okay, good. We have one or two more questions. Yeah, give the lady the microphone.
While I'm bringing the microphone over, can I just remind folks your evaluation form in the black booklet? If you could take that out, fill it out, please, and give it to us before you leave. And somebody's going there.
Hi, I was just wondering if you can use this in other situations, like meetings or things like that.
Okay, action learning is built around solving a problem, developing great strategies, getting a task completed. Meetings have two purposes. One is to give information. You don't need, action learning. Information is here are the new policies, here's what's happening next week. So whenever you're giving information or seeking information, you just do it regularly. You try to listen well and ask good questions. Action learning has to be built around a problem, a project, a challenge, an opportunity. Something that you've got to come up with a great strategy for. Because you don't get learning and you don't get action unless there's something worth changing or improving. So that's the distinction. A great question because, maybe 80% of staff meetings, you don't need action learning. But if you're the leader and saying, we finished all the information. Now, I've got a problem here. I'm going to meet with so-and-so next week or tomorrow. And I need some ideas on how I can convince this person to give us more staff. And so you use action learning for 20 minutes. And you'll get some ideas. You get someone to kind of agree to be the coach and recognize that we're here not only to come up with some ideas for tomorrow, but in order to do that, we all have to get better as a team. And why not develop our leadership skills? Because we're going to be working together for 5 or 10 years. Okay, one final question, or if there is one. Okay, that'll be the last question, and then I think we got to give those who would like to leave the opportunity of leaving, and those who would like to buy the book, I'll be there to sign them.
What do you do if you have groups that come up with great strategies, but they're not implemented by higher ups or other people in the organization?
Yeah. Before a problem presenter, whether it be an individual in the group or the CEO, they make a commitment to me if I'm the coach or to the group that I'm going to take action. This is an urgent problem. I don't have the ideas. I'm not going to ever have the resources or time that this group is going to put to this. So I'm going to take action. And I don't know what action is going to be, and you're going to be able to convince me that your ideas will work. I can ask you questions, but I'm going to take some action because I cannot allow this situation to continue for another 3 months or 6 months. Now, Jack Welch, I say, used parts of action learning in the workout process. And 99.9% of the time, when the group gave the VP, this is the strategy, they implemented it for a lot of reasons. First, they didn't have any other ideas. These were better than anything this person had thought of. Number two, Jack Welch was behind the person saying, you better have a damn good reason why you don't take these actions or better ideas, or you reject this, I'm going to look at you as a VP in my organization. But there's lots of reasons, but the main thing is that it's urgent, and I don't have any other ideas. But if that happens, I tell the group, you do that, you destroy action learning in the organization. Because people are working on this with the belief and the promise that you're going to take action. So I get that. I get it up front. This case here, I asked each of the people who said, this is an urgent problem. I'm going to take action. Don't know what it is. But I think every single person here, after it was over, said, here's the action I'm going to take. It might not have been all the ideas that I heard, but these are the 3 or 4 that I'm going to take. And that's all you can ask for. Okay, so thank you all very much. Good luck in action learning.
Thank you, Mike. I have a small token of UMBC's appreciation.
Okay, good.
I'm a GW alumni, so I'm proud of GW. I'm proud of UMBC, but...
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, thank you. I'll put this on, it'll keep me warm. Okay, thank you all very much. Good luck.
Thank you for attending. I know some people in this county are looking for jobs. We have a great website. If you go to our career information on our website, we have a listserv that you can sign up for. You get job openings, get training, performance improvement, instructional design, emailed to you. Please remember to fill out your evaluation forms and give them to us before you leave. And for those of you who would like to share this event with colleagues, we're going to have the video posted to YouTube, hopefully in a couple of weeks. And everyone that registered for the event, we will send you an email saying that the video is now available on YouTube for viewing. So thank you very much. Remember, we have a
I'll go with the books.
in September. So save the date, September 24th. We'll see you then. Thank you.